The first step to removing the DME is to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. So to do so, we're going to lift up this cover in the trunk. And on a normal car, you will have two plastic nuts, one here and one here, that will need to be removed. Once you remove those two nuts, you can lift this trunk panel and remove it. Once the trunk panel is removed, you'll see the battery exposed. On the battery, we're going to loosen the connection on the negative battery terminal. So to do so, we'll use a 10mm wrench to turn this bolt until the terminal is loose. And my terminal is already loose, so I'm just going to lift it off the battery and place it down there out of harm's way. Now in the engine bay, the first thing we're going to do is move the cross brace out of the way to make the install easier. So we're going to take our 15mm and 16mm socket, and first we're going to use a 16mm to loosen this bolt and remove it. And then once removed, we're going to switch to our 15mm socket and loosen this bolt here. Once this bolt is thoroughly loosened, we're going to move the brace out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is go to our ECU box and remove the outer cover. For that, we're going to use the Torx head specified, and we're going to loosen the bolts on each corner. And now it's a little bit more difficult on my car, as I said, because I have a JB4 installed, so some of these wires are in the way. But these bolts will not come out all the way. They are meant to just loosen a little bit, and then they are fully removed. You can tell because the bolts will be loose. But you do not want to screw these out all the way, just a little bit. And then you can test by lifting, and now we can see that this one still needs to come out a little bit. And now the ECU box is exposed. What we're going to do is disconnect all of the ECU connectors. And once again, as I mentioned before, I have some extra wiring here that probably won't be there on your car, so it's a little bit more of a pain. But to remove these connectors, you push it on this release pin and then slide down on the bracket. And so we're going to do this for each of the connectors that is installed in the ECU box. And then the final clip is a more standard type of clip with a tab on each side to be removed. The next step is to remove this tab at the back of the ECU box. This tab is supported by two clips on the exterior and two clips on the inside. And I have already released these two clips. You can just use a flathead screwdriver to pop them open. And the challenging part is releasing the two clips on the inside. So now that we have these wires released, we can kind of see them in here. So we're going to try to release them. And you can release them by pulling away. They have an open slot. And there's one here and one there. So once released, this tab will open and expose this. Next, we're going to move all the wires out of the way. So to remove these, you can just lift up, and the connectors and their rubber grommets will come with them. And so on my car, as I mentioned, I have this aftermarket intake, so I may have less room than you do. But we just want to get these out of the way so the ECU can slide up when the time comes. And obviously the middle one is the most challenging. And then there's one at the front as well with a small connector in it. And now we see the ECU box fully exposed. The next step in the removal process is to release this gray cover that surrounds the ECU. And to do so, there's a clip on this side of the ECU box and a clip on this side of the ECU box. And it's hard to see right now, but you'll be able to notice it because most of the ECU box is black and the clip is going to be gray on each side. And to do so, I'm going to use the hook tool, and you don't have to use this, but it makes the job very easy. So I'm going to position the hook tool down into this area here so that I can come from underneath the clip, and from the wrong way. once in, I'm going to position it under the clip, so I'm lifting up the clip up and over the tab. So once you are over the tab, you'll want to pull up inside the ECU box on this gray cover. And now we can see this side of the gray cover is removed. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. And now we can see the ECU box itself is exposed. The final step in the ECU box removal process is to remove the auxiliary coolant lines. So there's a coolant line on each side of the box, and on the top of the coolant line is a blue tab that needs to be pushed in before the hose can be slid off. So I'm going to use 2 screwdrivers for this job, a long one to put pressure on the hose away from the ECU, and a shorter one but thicker to compress in the blue tab. So once you have the blue tab compressed in, you can begin to slide away from the ECU box. Now that side is complete, and I'll go to the other side. And now we can see that both hoses are fully removed from the ECU box. Now that both hoses are removed, we can grab the ECU itself and slide it out of the box. Worth noting that there will be coolant inside this line, so if you're going to mail it in, you should drain it out. And some coolant will be expelled from those 2 hoses out underneath your car. It should only be a very minor amount though, and I don't think that, in my opinion, draining is necessary to remove this. So now we have our DME or ECU fully removed and ready to be sent in to be flashed.